The Life of Brian. This is my favorite comedy of all time. Now, to me, Black Dynamite is the funniest movie I've ever seen based on the humor alone, but Life of Brian goes above and beyond that. It can stay a consistently funny film while at the same time having a serious message. And majority of the time, that bugs me about most comedies. They try to include a serious plot line within a movie that's just supposed to be funny. Dinner for Schmucks, at least to me, is a movie filled with a lot of humor, but unfortunately, they include serious scenes, and that just kind of slows down the movie altogether. And I keep using this movie as an example because it is the best example to me. Comedies with serious scenes are a fucking drag to watch. Life of Brian is the only comedy I've seen that can pull this off, and maybe Shaun of the Dead, but Life of Brian has this moral that you shouldn't be just a blind follower when it comes to religion. It's good to question things, and what makes this special is that it's not out of place. It works perfectly in the film. The execution of this message is really good. And best of all, the Monty Python people know this is a comedy. It's a comedy first, and they keep it that way. The Breakfast Club. Sorry, but this is the only John Hughes movie on this list. I think this is the only movie I consider to be, I guess, top tier. His other movies are good, but I haven't seen one that's on the same level as this film. Actually, now that I think about it, Ferris Bueller's Day Off is probably pretty close to this one. Now, a lot of people talk about this movie. It's referenced a lot. However, I still think it's overlooked. I love the fact that there's 7 characters in this film that at least one person can relate to, or 8 if you count all the parents as one character. Even that one scene at the beginning where the parents are interacting with their children, there's barely any dialogue, sometimes no dialogue, but you get a sense of what these parents are like, which shows the home life the main characters are living in. Everyone loves Bender. Bender's a great character, I agree, but honestly, I liked Andrew Clark more. He just felt more real to me. Maybe it's because I knew guys like him in my high school. Bender, not so much. The Breakfast Club is a classic, and for many good reasons. Catch Me If You Can. First Spielberg movie on the list. It's not the last. I got one more on here, and it's up higher. I'm sorry if I don't have any other Spielberg movie on here. He's a fantastic director, but sometimes he lets the campiness in his writing take the steering wheel. And unfortunately, it kind of turns me off from his movies, especially in his PG-13 films, because he can never find a perfect balance between going all out and keeping it family friendly. Fortunately, Catch Me If You Can doesn't have that tone issue, despite the movie being PG-13. Here, Spielberg is able to keep the movie fun, but also grounded. It doesn't become campy, it doesn't become whimsical, it doesn't do any dumb shit like that. It keeps the same tone for the entire movie. I also like that Catch Me If You Can is a bit of an adrenaline rush. I mean, it's not exactly like Good Time, where the whole movie is just one big adrenaline rush, or Uncut Gems, because there are moments in this movie where it kind of calms down. And you know what, I actually prefer that, because sometimes when a movie's too intense, I'm kind of taken out of it. But Catch Me If You Can has a couple of breathers. It gives the audience time to relax. And not only that, but this film has strong characters, a strong story. Acting is amazing. I mean, you got Christopher Walken, Leonardo DiCaprio, Amy Adams, Tom Hanks. A very strong cast for a very strong film. Come and See. I do have other war films above this one, so it's not my favorite, but I will say it is definitely the most realistic war film I've ever seen. The imagery is so dark, gruesome, gritty. Come and See uses pretty much just practical effects, and the cinematography is so good that it makes it look like actual footage from World War II. It's amazing how grounded and realistic this film is, and while I do like it a lot, I thought the story could have been a little bit stronger. It's by no means bad, but I'm not a huge fan of the journey plot where a character just goes to different locations and it's kind of episodic. It works in TV shows like Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo, but in a movie, I don't know, it's just alright. But what's just god tier is the acting. The acting is fucking fantastic. Again, if you watch this film, it feels like actual World War II footage. Like, it is scary realistic. The actor who played Florian, the main character, did an amazing job. It's almost too real. Like, that's how good his acting is in this film. If you want to see a war film that shows the side of the Russians during World War II, I definitely recommend this one. Goodfellas. You guys might be a little bit hurt to see it this low on the list because I've seen a lot of your comments ranking your favorite films, and it seems Goodfellas is always in your top 10, so sorry. If it means anything, it's my second favorite Scorsese film. I have one more just above it. But anyways, I still adore this film. Pretty much love it for the same reasons I like The Wolf of Wall Street. The only two differences, the style is much different in this film, and I think Goodfellas had a better cast. And that's not to say The Wolf of Wall Street had a terrible cast. It's actually really good as well. But I mean, Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci, that is incredibly hard to beat, and this is in their prime. I also thought the plot was more interesting in this film than The Wolf of Wall Street. There was a lot more tension, people were dying left and right as opposed to, is Jordan Belfort gonna lose his money? I kinda hope he does. I will say Leonardo DiCaprio almost made me root for Jordan Belfort, despite the person he's portraying in real life is a huge fucking scumbag. But anyways, back to Goodfellas. I also find this movie to be funnier, even though it doesn't try as hard as Wolf of Wall Street. And that movie's also really funny, but this one's more subtle. And honestly, I can't really think of any problems I have with the movie itself. From a technical standpoint, from a writing standpoint, it's pretty damn near perfect. Pulp Fiction. Yeah, this one might be too low for some of you too, but whatever, it's my list. This is my second favorite Tarantino film, and the other one's much higher on the list. If you've seen my Tarantino list, you probably know what's up above. But what do I love about Pulp Fiction? Well, this is gonna sound weird after complaining about episodic movies, but I like the fact that it doesn't have a cohesive plot. The whole movie's like a puzzle. You're constantly putting shit together as you watch it, but at the same time, it's very relaxing. It's not one of those intense mind game movies, you know, it just shows you different parts of the timeline within the film. It is kind of episodic in a way, but not really. There are different subplots in here, but it's all kind of connected. The performances are amazing. I really like Samuel L. Jackson and Uma Thurman, but my favorite performance in this film is from Christopher Walken. His one scene in this film is one of the funniest fucking things I've ever seen. I love how it begins in a serious tone, and then you slowly start to realize this is supposed to be comical. When we hear that Bruce Willis's dad dies from dysentery, and then we later learn that he shoved the watch, the very important watch in the movie, up his asshole, you put the pieces together that the watch killed him. Shit like that is hilarious to me, and I love how subtle they are about it. You know, they don't bring it up and be like, oh, it was the watch that did it. You just kind of figure it out for yourself. I also want to say I really enjoyed John Travolta in this movie, and I usually don't enjoy his performances. I don't know, he's in a lot of bad movies and sometimes it's enjoyable, but it doesn't fit him, but I loved him in this one. Overall, Pulp Fiction is very unique and very enjoyable. Rashomon. Again, much like Pulp Fiction, it's very unique, it's very stylized, it's told in different parts. While Pulp Fiction is more entertaining, I would say this movie is a lot more deep. It tackles subjects such as why life is worth living. You know, a lot of movies do that now, but this is one of the OG movies that did it, and they did it so well. Because it's not in-your-face, dystopia, terrible world we live in, type of brainless dumb shit. Sorry, that was a neckbeard rant. But it's all about finding the truth. And if we don't know the truth, then what's the point of life? Majority of the movie is about 3 different stories about the same premise, and each story is told from a different perspective. So obviously someone here is lying, and this is what used to reveal the terribleness in people. And then we get one of the best endings to any movie I've seen. And I don't want to spoil it, but it's all about basically still having hope for humanity type of thing. That there's still good and innocence in people, despite how horrible and corrupt the world can look. And again, we've seen this before, but this is one of the first movies to do this message, and they do it so well. So I definitely recommend this movie if you haven't seen it. I'm not going to say too much about it, because I don't want to spoil it for you. American Psycho. This film has an eyes wide shut type of vibe to it. You know, it just feels like one long nightmare, and it's also about exposing the rich elitists. And much like Eyes Wide Shut, people are kind of seen as pawns. They're devalued in a corporate society. Like, you know, people have their own interpretation of what the film's about. Some people say it's anti-capitalist, some people say it was just in Patrick Bateman's head, who's the main character. But I personally believe it's more on the level of how people can become so psychopathic due to the world being run on money. Like that one scene of that one real estate agent selling an apartment where Patrick Bateman killed someone. That was to show that she doesn't care and wants to make a profit off the apartment despite someone dying in there. It's of no concern to her. And after Patrick Bateman goes on a killing spree, his lawyer reassures him that it was all in his head. But really, to me, it displays that he knows what happened and he just wants to cover it up. To show that everyone in Patrick Bateman's quote-unquote friend group lacks any sort of sympathy, he realizes that he's also disposable. Everyone in the friend group is just trying to one-up each other. Anyways, I love the acting in the movie. Christian Bale does a great job. Even Jared Leto does decently, even though he's a bit of a weirdo. Into the Spiderverse. After the greatest film of 2017, the Emoji Movie, came out, of course my expectations were high for Spider-Verse. Jokes aside, I love this movie. I mean, I've never seen a production studio upgrade this much, and they didn't have to. I mean, despite how horrible the Emoji Movie was, it did make a decent amount of money. It's like Illumination, you know, they'll produce any sort of shitty movie and it'll make some cash back. It pains me to say this, but the input and output ratio of Spider-Verse is very similar to that of the Emoji Movie. Why is Spider-Verse just the best gosh darn movie around? When I saw the trailer, I thought the film would just be visually appealing. I thought it'd be overall bland because the characters are boring and, you know, the story's not all that great, but I was pleasantly surprised. Everything about Spider-Verse is fantastic. The characters, the story, the music, and because of the unique art style, there's a lot of hidden jokes, a lot of hidden Easter eggs, even though there's smaller aspects like the pacing and the comedy. I believe all of it is perfect. Even the more sorrowful scenes hit pretty hard. I saw Spider-Verse right after Stanley's death, and his cameo just fucking hurt. I will say one issue I have with the movie is when the other Spider-Man characters are in a different universe, randomly they'll just start glitching out. And even though Gwen is from a different universe, she didn't do that in the school. I guess you could argue this is a nitpick, but at the same time, it is kind of integral to the plot. But really, that's my only issue. Other than that, it's my favorite Spider-Man film up to date. Battle Royale. I heard this is one of Tarantino's favorite films. I checked it out and I loved it. Now, whether Hunger Games copied this or not, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, Battle Royale is such a broad genre, and the meanings behind both films are completely different. And that's actually one of the main reasons why Battle Royale is a better movie than Hunger Games. In Battle Royale, it's about Japanese students combating each other throughout the educational system, showing how hard and intense it is. Not to sound like a neckbeard, but Hunger Games is like every other mainstream dystopia teen film. The message in those movies is always rich elitist bad. Please do something fucking different. And you know, I don't hate the first Hunger Games movie. I think it's an okay film. They do a pretty good job with world building, and I was invested in some of the characters, but the sequels are pretty shit. My biggest pet peeve with the second film, the past victors, the supposed experts of the game, seem a lot weaker and sometimes dumber than the kids in the first movie. Battle Royale, on the other hand, has two victors from previous games, and besides the main character, they're the ones controlling the game the entire time. They actually feel like past victors. Another advantage this movie has over Hunger Games is that it's rated R, so it can go fucking balls out, be as gruesome as it wants, and it takes full advantage of that. My favorite characters are Shogo and Kiriyama, two of the past victors, and they both handle the game completely different, and I love seeing that dynamic between the both of them. Kiriyama is an amazing antagonist. He's very threatening, very intimidating. He's got an awesome background theme. To me, he's the best part of the movie. I don't want to say too much about it because if you haven't seen this one, I highly recommend it, and it's easy to spoil it if I talk more about the other characters. Napoleon. Wow, look at me watching a 5.5 hour black and white film from the 20s. Oh man, my neck's getting kind of itchy. So I've been getting into black and white films, not because I have a huge fucking hairy neck, but I like the way they look. Now, from a storytelling standpoint, it is hard to follow sometimes, and I do prefer audio in my movie, but I've studied Napoleon Bonaparte before, so I had a lot of background knowledge coming into this movie, and you know what? I love it. This is my favorite black and white film. Wow. It did take about like 3 days to watch the whole thing, mostly because it's a very long fucking film. Sometimes the pacing was but even that aside, I was still very invested. Now, I'm a big fan of the French Revolution. I think it's a very interesting time period. The scenery is gorgeous. I love pretty much every single shot in this movie. The cinematography was really on point. Maximilien Robespierre is in the movie, and they give him these really cool looking shades. I don't know why they did that, but it really fits him. Besides this film just looking gorgeous, it looks massive. This movie was filmed on 3 interlocked cameras, so you saw everything in that shot. The movie took full advantage of this technique because they needed it. A lot of points in Napoleon's life was very grand. Having the battle shot on 3 interlocked cameras was a very good idea, or just simply show the landscape. Now, one issue I do have with this movie is that it doesn't feel too grounded at maybe 1 or 2 points. It feels like that whimsical Spielberg theme that he tries to push in his movies, and that shit annoys me. But I give Napoleon some slack because, again, it was made in the 20s. Honestly, a positive is just that the actors weren't too exaggerated in here. They knew to keep it calm and collective, since, you know, the actors during that time had to exaggerate through their acting because of the lack of audio. But that's kind of nitpicky. Overall, I really enjoyed it. Lawrence of Arabia. Much like Napoleon 1927, this movie is also incredibly grand in terms of scale. Everything just feels so massive and vast and open. And I'm surprised I like it as much as I do because to me the desert is a very boring place. Save Western films because they have more going on in the background than just sand.
I don't like sand.
Now, the background of Lawrence of Arabia is just sand for most of it, but there's also the addition of music and cinematography. For me, both of these elements really got me invested and pulled me into the film, because if I'm not invested in the environment around the characters, then I find it harder to actually get invested in the characters themselves. The cinematography took full advantage of the grand landscape, and of course, that famous main score that gives most people goosebumps. I never knew much about Thomas Edward Lawrence until I saw this movie, and from what I've heard, the film is very faithful to his memoir, and that's probably one of the reasons why I was so invested in the film, because I'm learning actual history by watching it. I also love how much of an emotional ride it is. Like, there's some great happy moments, some feel-good moments, some sad moments, some characters in the movie that might make you angry. Now, if these type of movies bore you where it's just kind of telling the life of a certain historical figure, I understand, but to me, I would consider it to be a masterpiece. Pink Floyd, The Wall. This movie has gained a lot of attention recently because of Doug Walker's horrendous review of the movie. It's not even about an opposition of opinions, it's just fucking god-awful. I mean, every movie reviewer I know on the website has completely shat on that movie review, and for good reason, but actually talking about the movie itself, I'm not saying that smoking a joint before watching it doesn't enhance your experience. It does. But I will say it's also fun sober. If you haven't seen it, it's basically one long music video. If that's not your thing, I get it. There is a story, there are certain characters, but it's not like a linear, simplified told story. And to be honest, I'm not watching it for that reason. I'm not saying it's bad, but the music and art style are just in another fucking tier. I love how this movie looks, how it sounds. I love how over the top it can get. I can't really describe anything else about it besides like the hidden meanings and whatnot, but I could talk about that for probably an hour. But yeah, you guys should just watch it for yourselves if you haven't seen it yet. In case you want to keep your pissy mood, I suggest watching the movie and then right afterwards watch Doug Walker's review of The Wall. You know, just a nice way of turning on that 8 part of your brain. Some things are just so cringe that it fills me with rage. I don't know why. 2001 Space Odyssey. Even though I am in love with this movie, it is still not even in the top 3 of my favorite Kubrick movies. I think I got like 4 more above this one. But even so, I adore Space Odyssey. I've seen people say it's boring, puts you to sleep, and I used to be in that camp. I used to not like this movie because I would doze off multiple times while watching it, because when the movie's not showing all these unique and intriguing visuals, it's very dialogue heavy, and I can see where that turns a lot of people off. But I watched it a second time and I started to respect it more, because I was paying too much attention to the dialogue heavy scenes and they did make me feel kind of drowsy. But then I realized they're not that significant. When you watch Space Odyssey for a second time, it feels less tiring and straining because you have prior knowledge coming into it. I felt like I could enjoy it more a second viewing because I wasn't trying to focus on the dialogue scenes too much, and I could just simply relax and enjoy the visuals. And that's kind of why I watch it. It's about the fear of the unknown. Besides the visuals, what really blows my mind is that this movie came out in 1968. The effects are fucking fantastic. I mean, movies like this, like the original Star Wars, it just goes to show why I think practical effects are superior compared to CGI. The soundtrack is also amazing. The music gives off this grand yet emptiness vibe, but the movie also knows when to be silent because it is in space, an empty void of nothing. One of the characters' deaths in this movie was done completely in silence, and it really fit. Since, you know, there's no sound in space, it just felt very real and eerie. Brazil. I really relate to this movie in multiple different ways. I've talked about Sam Laurie being one of my favorite characters of all time because I really resonate with the character, but the movie Brazil also has my personality, if that makes sense. It's a very crazy movie, and it's also filled with dark humor, but it's not Family Guy shock type humor. It's actually like subtle dark comedy. Brazil also has one of my favorite actors, Robert De Niro, in it, so that's always a plus. Now, the reason why I really relate to the character Sam is because we both shared this mindset that we're comfortable in our current lives, and even though we have opportunities in front of us, we'd rather stay in our position because it's familiar, and change is just something we don't want to take a chance with. Sam also daydreams a lot when he's at work, and I used to do this all the time in high school. I didn't want to fucking be there. This film also looks amazing. I love the sets. You actually feel like you're in this magnificent giant future city because, again, practical effects come in clutch. I will admit the story is a bit confusing at first watch, I think, at least for me, but second time viewing it, I enjoyed it a lot more. This movie also has one of my favorite endings of all time. It's very smart, lots of build up, and it fits the narrative of the movie very well.